Good day everyone, I am CHANDRO and I'm here to present to you the geography of Africa. So Africa, also known as the second largest continent, is bounded by Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, and the Atlantic Ocean. It is divided almost equally in the half of the equator. Africa's physical geography, environment and resources, and human geography can be considered separately. Africa has 8 major physical regions: the Sahara, the Sahel, the Ethiopian, the Savannah, the Swahili Coast, the rainforest, the African Great Lakes, and the Southern Africa. Some of these regions cover large bands of the continent, such as the Sahara and Sahel, while others are isolated areas, such as the Ethiopian highlands and the Great Lakes. Each of these regions has unique animal and plant communities. Sahara. The Sahara is the world's largest hot desert, covering 8.5 million square kilometers, about the size of the South American country of Brazil. Defining Africa's northern bulge, the Sahara makes up 25% of the continent. The Sahara has a number of distinct physical features including ergs, regs, hamadas, and oases. Ergs, which cover 20% of the Sahara, are sand dunes that stretches about the hundreds of kilometers at weights of more than 300 meters. Ergs cover most of the Algeria and Libya and parts of Mali and Nigeria. Ergs can contain large quantities of salt, which is sold for industrial and food use. Regs are plains of sand and gravel that make up 70% of the Sahara. The gravel can be black, red, or white. Regs are the remains of the prehistoric seabeds and riverbeds, but are now nearly waterless. Hamadas are elevated plateaus of rock and stone that reaches heights of 3,353 meters. They include the Atlas Mountains, which stretches from southern Morocco to northeastern Tunisia, the Pesti Mountains of southern Libya and northern Chad, and the Hagar Mountains in the southern Algeria. Sahel. So the Sahel is a narrow band of semi-arid land that forms a transition zone between the Sahara to the north and the savannas to the south. It is made up of flat, barren plains that stretch roughly 5,400 kilometers across Africa from Senegal to Sudan. The Sahel contains a fertile delta of the Niger, one of Africa's longest rivers. Unfortunately, the Sahel's fertile land is rapidly becoming a desert as a result of drought, deforestation, and intensive agriculture. This is process known as desertification. Ethiopian Highlands. The Ethiopian highlands began to rise 75 million years ago as a magma from Earth's mantle uplifted a broad dome of ancient rock. This dome was later split as Africa's continental crust pulled apart, creating the Great Rift Valley system. Today, this valley cuts through the Ethiopian highlands from the southwest to the northeast. The Ethiopian highlands are home to 80%. The Savannah. Savannas or grasslands cover almost half of the Africa, more than 13 million square kilometers. These grasslands makes up most of the Central Africa, beginning south of the Sahara and the Sahel and ending north of the continent's southern tip. Swahili Coast. So the Swahili Coast stretches about 1,610 kilometers along the Indian Ocean from Somalia to Mozambique. The nearby coral reefs and barrier islands protect the coast from severe weather. Rainforest. Most of the African native rainforest has been destroyed by development, agriculture, and forestry. Today, 80% of Africa's rainforest is concentrated in Central Africa along the Congo River Basin. African Great Lakes. The Great Lakes are located in the 9 countries that surround the Great Rift Valley as the African continent separated from the Arabian Peninsula. Large, deep cracks formed in Earth's surface. These cracks later filled with water. This geologic process created some of the largest and deepest lakes in the world. There are 7 major African Great Lakes: Lake Albert, Lake Edward, Lake Kivu, Lake Malawi, Lake Tanganyika, Lake Turkana, Lake Victoria. And Lake Victoria, the largest lake in Africa, is the southern source of the Nile River, the largest river in the whole world. Southern Africa. The region of Southern Africa is dominated by the Kaap Craton, a shell of bedrock that is more than 2.6 billion years old. Rocky features of Southern Africa include plateaus and mountains such as Drakensberg Range.
Let's proceed on traveling. Traveling and how to go to Africa. I know for a fact that Africa is really far from our country, which is the Philippines. And there are some people here that have misinterpreted the country Africa. However, some people are really trying their best to go there, to experience their life, their culture, and so much more. So what it's take to go there? Or how we will go there? Upon checking there are 4 airports where we can go to Africa. The first one is Manila to Casablanca. The Casablanca is located at the Morocco. The second one is Manila to Nairobi. Nairobi is located at Kenya. And the third one is Johannesburg, and this is located at the south city of the Africa. And the last is Cape Town. This is located at South Africa, where in fact this is the capital of the Africa. So let us now proceed to their costumes. Most of us know what is costume or national clothes all about. This is the representation of our country depending on what we're trying to show them. But what costume did African people wearing? Let's go and find it out. African clothing is the traditional clothing worn by the people of Africa. In some instances, these traditional garments have been replaced by Western clothing introduced by European colonists. Like in our country, they are also colonized and ended up mixed up in so much things. Example that I can say is kanga. This is worn by women in the country. The kanga is a colorful machine-printed cloth. It's frequently identified with the Swahili culture along the East African coast starting in early 1880s. This rather mysterious cloth continues to be used and valued by millions of people in many countries today. The kanga is approximately 45 times 65 inches in size and usually sold in pairs, and can be identified by its distinctive border and central design or motif. Typically a line and text are printed along the border. The second presentation that I can give is burnous. Burnous became a distinctive part of the uniform of the French army of South African Spanish cavalry, recruited in Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. It was also sometimes worn unofficially by officers or soldiers of other units in North Africa. The white burnous remains part of the parade uniform of the remaining Spanish regiment of the French army. One side of the burnous when worn, and the other half drapes down in front of the wearer.
There are many famous landmarks in Africa with rich history. Some example includes the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. These ancient pyramids were built between 2550 and 2490 BC and are some of the oldest and most well-preserved structure of their kind in the world. And second one is the Victoria Falls in Zambia and Zimbabwe. These massive waterfalls, which are over a mile wide and 360 feet tall, have been a popular tourist destination for centuries. And the local Koloko tribe named them Mosio Watunya, which means the smoke that thunders. And the third one is the Citadel of Salah and Din in Cairo, Egypt. This forest, also known as the Saladin Citadel, was built in the 12th century and served as the seat of government for Egypt for many centuries. And it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And lastly, the Timbuktu in Mali. This ancient city, located in the desert region of West Africa, was once a major century of trade and Islamic scholarship. It is known for its many ancient mosques and tombs, and also it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Traditional practices. Africa is a vast and diverse continent, and there is no single set of traditional practices that are followed by all African cultures. However, many African societies have a strong tradition of oral storytelling, music, dance, and art. These traditions are often passed down from generation to generation and play a central role in the cultural identity of many African communities. In some African societies, traditional religious beliefs and practices are still an important part of their daily life. For example, many people in West Africa follow tradition and religion that involve a worship of ancestor, nature, spirit, and deities. In some cases, these beliefs are combined with the practice of Islam or Christianity. The other traditional practice in Africa includes the use of herbs and traditional medicines for healing, the use of sacrification for cultural and spiritual purposes, and the use of traditional materials and techniques in craftsmanship and architecture. Many African societies also have strong traditions of community, decision-making, and conflict resolution, with a focus achieving consensus and maintaining social harmony.
So let's talk about the currency in Africa, and it is called the South African Rand or the ZAR. Okay. South African Rand refers to the legal currency of the Republic of South Africa. It is also recognized as a legal currency in the common monetary area that it shares with Lesotho, Namibia, and Eswatini. Although each country in the monetary union also uses its own currency. And the word rand is derived from Waters Rand, the name of the high escarpment in South Africa, where the country's capital city, Johannesburg, is located. Like many dollar-denominated currencies, the rand is divided into 100 cents. All South African coins and banknotes are produced and issued by the country's central bank, the South African Reserve Bank. The South African rand was first produced in 1961 when South Africa became a republic. It replaced the South African pound, which used to be the legal currency of the Union of South Africa since it was established as a British Dominion in 1910. Mabuhay, I am Kelvin Rodriguez and I'll be discuss the languages in Africa. So with anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000 languages, Africa is home to approximately one-third of the world's languages. The diversity of Africa's languages is shown by their population. Over 1 million people speak at least 75 different languages in Africa, but I will be discuss the main languages that is spoken in the Africa. So the first one is Swahili. Between 100 and 150 million people was speaking Swahili, the most common language in the Africa, and Swahili referred to as a Bantu language, reportedly descended from other tongues like Arabic. And Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, Burundi, Rwanda, Southern Somalia, Northern Mozambique, and the Comoros Islands all speak this as official language, in addition to Tanzania, Uganda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Tanzania. The primary language of instruction in school is in Swahili, which is not seen to be particularly challenging to acquire, especially if you already know a little Arabic. So, fun fact, Swahili was the language used in The Lion King. I know you guys watch The Lion King. Remember Do you guys remember the Hakuna Matata? So, Hakuna Matata means no worries in Swahili, and Simba means lion. The second to the last language is the Shona, most prominently spoken in Zimbabwe along with English. Shona is an African language used by over 10 million people. There are three distinct Shona dialects, including the Karanga, the Zezuru, and the Kore. Stemming from the Bantu or Ngoni language family, Shona uses the Latin script in its writing system. So the last language that I will be discussed is the Arabic. Okay, it is spoken by 280 million people worldwide. Arabic is also used by the people in countries like Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, Libya, Tunisia, and Eritrea. There is modern standard Arabic, which is mainly used in communication with most Arabic speakers. This is the dialect used to write the language and is present in media and books.
Nelson Mandela. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born in Transkei, South Africa on July 18, 1918. After the banning of the ANC in 1960, Nelson Mandela argued for the setting up of a military wing within the ANC. In 1963, when many fellow leaders of the ANC and the Umkhonto we Sizwe were arrested, Mandela was brought to stand trial with them for plotting to overthrow the government by violence. Nelson Mandela was released on February 11, 1990. In 1991, at the first national conference of the ANC held inside South Africa, after the organization had been banned in 1960, Mandela was elected president of the ANC, while his lifelong friend and colleague, Oliver Tambo, became the organization's national chairperson. Cleopatra. Cleopatra ruled ancient Egypt as co-regent, first with her father, then with her two younger brothers, and finally with her son, for almost 3 decades. She was part of dynasty of Macedonian rulers founded by Ptolemy, who served as general under Alexander the Great during his conquest of Egypt in 332 BC. Well-educated and clever, Cleopatra could speak various languages and serve as the dominant ruler in all 3 of her co-regencies. Her romantic liaisons and military alliances with the Roman leaders Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, as well as her supposed exotic beauty and powers of seduction, earned her an enduring place in history and popular myth. Charlize Theron. She was born on August 7, 1975 in Benoni, South Africa. She is a South African-born actress who was noted for her versatility and earned an Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance as real-life serial killer in Monster in 2003. Theron grew up on a farm near Benoni, South Africa. At age 13, wanting to continue her ballet studies, she began attending a boarding school that specialized in the arts. During a visit home when she was 15, her mother shot and killed her father in self-defense after being attacked by him while he was drunk. At age 16, Theron moved to Milan to work as a model. 2 years later, she settled in New York City, where she continued to model and began studying at the Joffrey Ballet School. A knee injury ended her chances of a career in dance, however, and she attempted unsuccessfully to pursue acting jobs. C. James. Sidney James, born Solomon Joel Cohen, May 8, 1913, was a British actor and comedian, born to a middle-class Jewish family in South Africa, whose career encompassed radio, television, stage, and screen. He was best known for numerous roles in the Carry On film series. James, having started his career in his native country, found his greatest success in the UK, beginning his screen career playing bit parts in films from 1947. He was cast in numerous small and supporting roles into the 1950s. He appeared in the film The Lavender Hill Moth in 1951, starring Alec Guinness. His profile was raised as Tony Hancock, co-star in Hancock Half Hour, first in the radio series and later when it was adapted for television and ran from 1954 to 1960. Afterwards, he became known as a regular performer in the Carry On films, appearing in 19 films of the series with the top billing roles in 17. His starring roles in television sitcoms continued, and he starred in the 1917 sitcom Bless This House until his death in 1976. Oscar Pistorius. The outside of both of Oscar Leonard, Carl Pistorius' feet and both of his fibulae were amputated when he was 11 months old due to a congenital defect. He was born without them. Oscar Leonard Carl Pistorius was born November 22, 1986, is a South African murderer who was also a former professional sprinter. Pistorius tried to compete in non-disabled international tournaments after winning the Paralympic gold medal, but the International Association of Athletics Federations (IAAF) vehemently objected, claiming that his prosthetic limbs gave him an unfair advantage. Pistorius made history by being the first amputee to take home a non-disabled world track medal at the 2011 World Championships in Athletics. Pistorius participated in the 2012 Summer Olympics as the first double amputee. Pap and Blea Shisanyama, South Africa. This dish is prepared using a braai, a type Cannibalism. In Africa, cannibalism and ritual murder were frequently linked. Cannibalism. In Africa, cannibalism and ritual murder were frequently linked to sorcery. Bits of the bodies or heads of opponents were sometimes swallowed by head hunters and others to absorb their vitality or other attributes and weaken their ability to exact revenge.
So now let's proceed on what climate Africa has. The diverse climate of Africa ranges from scorching desert to icy glaciers, from steamy rainforests to grassy plains. Owing to Africa's position across equatorial and subtropical latitude in both the northern and southern hemisphere, several different types of climate can be found within, like the rainforest, the savanna, steppe, the desert, and Mediterranean. Continent of Africa mainly lies within the intertropical zone between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. Hence, its a density of humidity. Precipitation intensity is always high and it's a hot continent. Warm and hot climates prevail all over Africa, but mostly the northern part is marked by aridity and high temperature. Only the northernmost and the southernmost fringe of the continent have a Mediterranean climate. The equator runs through the middle of Africa, as do the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, making Africa the most tropical continent in the world. The center of the continent has a wet tropical climate with extremely heavy rainfall. To the north and south are belts of tropical climates with a dry season. Beyond lie belts of tropical climates with longer dry periods and occasional drought, such as those that have caused famines in the Sahel. North of the Sahel lies the almost rainless Sahara Desert, but in the narrow southern part of Africa, cool, moist air masses moving inland from ocean bring some summer rainfall to the Kalahari Desert. Finally, north and south of the desert region are belts of Mediterranean climates, with hot, dry summers and mild, moist winter. Each climate region of Africa has its local variation. The Mediterranean climates of North Africa brings coast at least 16 inches of rainfall a year, with some mountainous areas getting several times more. However, the region's southern interior has a desert climate with fewer than 4 inches of precipitation. Between these two areas is a region of dry floodplains called steppes, where annual rainfall ranges from 4 to 16 inches. Summer droughts last 5 months or longer, and the rainfall in the steppes can cause devastating flash floods on the area. Africa is known as a tribal continent, even though it's not always determining factors in a nation life. Colonial power took little notice of tribes when they draw their national boundary line. So the result is that several tribes overlap into 2 or even 3 modern-day countries. In countries like Egypt, the population is described as Egyptian or Arab without reference to origin. The subject of tribes and ethnicity in Africa is one of fascination. The African continent has 54 countries and around 1.3 billion people. Much of the African population belong to one of the estimated 3,000 tribes in the continent. Some of the tribes in Africa are belonging to uncontacted people. So the uncontacted people are a group of indigenous people living without sustained contact with neighboring communities and the world community. So this group who decide to remain uncontacted are referred to as indigenous people in voluntary isolation. Many of the forest-dwelling people in the country of Congo have been contacted frequently over the last century. However, it is supposed that many uncontacted tribes still exist. The Buti, a pygmy people, a contacted people, isolated case which can give us an idea of how the uncontacted tribes may live. The Buti are hunter-gatherers who see the forest as a parental figure that provides them with everything they require. They live in small, egalitarian villages. They are largely self-sufficient, but they do engage in trade with outside people. Their way of life is a risk due to deforestation, legal mining, genocide being carried out against pygmies.
Hello everyone, Chandra again, and this certain topic of mine might be controversial because some people tend to be racist and they see that people that has darker skin tones compared to them is inferior, but it's not. So the most common answer to the question why was Africa called the Dark Continent is that Europe did not know much about Africa until the 19th century, but that answer is misleading and disingenuous. Europeans had quite known a lot of Africa for at least 2,000 years, but European leaders began to purposely ignoring earlier sources of information to justify their colonialism and anti-blackness. It is true that up until the 19th century, Europeans had little direct knowledge of Africa beyond the coast, but their maps were already filled with details about the continent. African kingdoms had been trading with Middle Eastern and Asian states for over 2 millennia. Initially, Europeans drew on the maps and reports created by earlier traders and explorers like the famed Moroccan traveler Ibn Battuta, who traveled across the Sahara and along the north and east coast of Africa in the 1300s. The 18th century black activists and missionaries. By the late 1700s, British 18th century black abolitionists were campaigning hard against the practice of enslavement in England. They published pamphlets describing the horrid brutality and inhumanity of enslavement on plantations. One of the most famous images showed a black man in chains asking, "Am I not a man and a brother?" Once the British Empire abolished enslavement in 1833, however, the black activists turned their effort against the practice within Africa. In the colonies, the British were also frustrated that formerly enslaved people did not want to keep working on plantations for very low wages. To retaliate, the British portrayed African men not as human but as slave idlers, criminals, or evil traders of enslaved people. At the same time, missionaries began traveling to Africa. Their goal is to convert as many Africans as possible to Christianity. At the expense of existing African religions and customs and culture, African people already had built their civilizations, their culture, and their knowledge, especially on their own land and environment. The cultural erasure perpetrated by these European Christian missionaries caused significant damage to generations, while also attempting to distance African people from their own environment, which in turn left it even more vulnerable to damage and exploitation by imperialist interests. When decades later, missionaries still had few converts in many areas, they began saying that African people's hearts are unreachable, locked in darkness, rather than acknowledging why African people might not want their history, culture, and religion overridden by foreigners. The missionaries followed a familiar playbook called retaliation. They portrayed the African people as fundamentally different from Westerners, closed off by the saving light of Christianity, further propagating inaccurate and deeply racist stereotypes about Africa. Imperialism and duality. So imperialism was a global in the hearts of Western businessmen in the 19th century, but there were subtle differences between the imperialist demand of African resources compared to the other parts of the world that did not make it any less brutal. The heart of darkness. Africa was seen by the explorers as an erotically and psychologically powerful place of darkness, one that could only be cured by direct application of Christianity and of course capitalism. Geographer Lucy Jarosz describes this stand and stated belief clearly. Africa was seen as primeval, bestial, reptilian, or female entity to be tamed, enlightened, guided, and opened, and pierced by white European males through Western science, Christianity, civilization, commerce, and colonialism. The myth today. So over the years, people have given a lot of reasons why Africa was called the Dark Continent. Many people know it is a racist phrase but don't fully understand why. The common phrase believe that the phrase just referred to European lack of knowledge about Africa makes it seem outdated but otherwise benign. Race does lie at the heart of the myth, but it is not just about skin color. Calling Africa the Dark Continent further codified the association between whiteness, purity, and intelligence, and blackness as a pollutant that made one subhuman. This principle is exemplified by the one-drop rule. The myth of the Dark Continent referred to the inferiority that Europeans convinced themselves was endemic to Africa. To further their political and economic agenda, the idea that its lands were unknown came from disregarding centuries of pre-colonial history, contact, and travel across the continent. Population of Africa being the world's second largest and the second most populous continent after Asia in both cases, at about 30.3 million kilometers squared including adjacent islands, is covered about 6% of Earth's total surface area and 20% of its land area. With 1.4 billion people as of 2021, it accounts for about 18% of the world's human population. The largest race is in Hausa. The Hausa are primarily located in the West Africa and northern western Nigeria and southern Niger, but they are also found in Cameroon, Togo, Chad, Benin, Burkina Faso, and Ghana. They are notable because they are the largest ethnic group in Africa with a population of 78 million. Africa's major export. In the south and the central regions, precious metals and minerals are the biggest exports. This includes gold in Tanzania and South Africa. An important factor that influenced the growth of African exports was the discovery of petroleum in several countries, notably Libya, Algeria, Nigeria, Gabon, Angola, and the Republic of Congo and Cameroon, and the dramatic price increase brought about by the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, in the 1970s. Other factors include the discovery and the increased exploitation of minerals that are in high demand, such as diamonds, especially in Sierra Leone, the Republic of Congo, and the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the exploitation of the other minerals such as the uranium ore.
Religion in Africa. The majority of Africans are adherents of Christianity or Islam. African people often combine the practice of their traditional beliefs with the practice of Abrahamic religions. Abrahamic religions are widespread throughout Africa. The three main religious traditions is African traditional religion, Christianity, and Islam constitute the triple religious heritage of the African continent. This heritage, though contemporarily more dynamically evidenced, has a long history and influence. Christianity came first to the continent of Africa in the 1st or early 2nd century. Oral tradition says the first Muslims appeared while the Prophet Muhammad was still alive. Both religions have been on the continent of Africa for over 1,300 years. Did you know? The real name of Africa is Alkebulan. In fact, Africa was initially named Alkebulan and was widely referred to as Alkebulan before the name Africa was birthed. These are three interesting facts about Africa. Number 1, most of the world diamonds come from Africa. Number 2, Africa is the second largest continent of the world. And number 3, there are 54 countries in Africa.